we are talking about peace, the peace process, the ultimate reconciliation process, or is there a possibility for that kind of reconciliation? It seems like, I mean, I think you mentioned about African Union's role is like more detached. They don't want to get involved in the domestic politics. So that kind of politics there as well. So in terms of African Union's role, I mean, I think unless there is a serious push from the West, for example, or from the through UN Security Council or some kind of other mechanisms, then I think African Union can move a bit. But it's like push and pull factor. Like
the African Union has been dormant, but now it's out of nowhere, but it started to play some constructive role because of the push from the United States and the EU and the UN Security Council. So we'll touch that.
So African Union is in the focus now. Okay, so it seems like they have some serious responsibility. And do you think African Union actually can deliver, or do you think it's not African Union doesn't have the resource or doesn't have the leadership? Just like give us some kind of understanding about how much is there.
The role of African Union when it comes to peacekeeping and peace building or maybe peacemaking process in the member states has been marred with so many challenges and shortcomings in the past, even though there were some success stories within the IGAD regime or in the East African community. For example, in the case of somehow Djibouti in the 1994, where Djibouti, the government of Djibouti and the opposition forces have established some form of power sharing government. That was one of a limited success story. Then in Somalia, the African Union and IGAD, and of course, to some extent, the UN has played a role to bring about some form of peace and stability, relative peace and stability. And then the last initiative was in the case of Sudan and then lately South Sudan. So the situation is not completely bleak, and the role of African Union has been on the spotlight in the late 1990s and early 2000s, but since then we haven't seen any meaningful role played by the African Union or from the side of African Union and its leadership. So when we see most of what has been happening within the African continent, including the coup d'etat in the West African region, as you may know, of course, you are well aware of that, and what has recently happened in Sudan, of course, they issued some statement, but it was not powerful enough as it should be. And then when it comes to Ethiopia, the conflict is 1 year old now. It is in November. It was started on the 3rd of November. Now we are on the 10th of November. So the conflict is 1 year old now. And we have not witnessing a strong push, not necessarily push, but role from the side of African Union, except for a casual press releases over the past 1 year. But most recently, there has been some new developments in the form of initiating a dialogue between the warring parties. And to this end, the African Union Commission appointed the former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, which has received a unanimous support from the UN Security Council, European Union, and the government of the United States. So what does this imply? It shows some signals that after making some form of informal consultation between both parties at conflict in Ethiopia, he just reported yesterday night after we had our first interview, and showing that there is a very short and a limited window of opportunity. Saying the parties, both of the parties admitted their difference is political, which means there is a possibility for negotiated settlement. So overall, the African Union is now in the spotlight, But as to the challenges which you have mentioned, I could see this was a problem of legal mandate, because African Union has a mandate according to Article 2, Sub-Article 4 of the Constitutive Act, which says they can even have the mandate which goes to the extent of even intervening, including militarily, in the domestic affairs when it is deemed necessary. And when it comes to the structures, they have the structure including some peacekeeping, some standing and peacekeeping force, not adequate enough, but still there is a possibility. But the issue is about political commitment and precedence. Do they have the culture? Not really. And what is inhibiting them? Because of two reasons. One, there is a doctrine of salience of territory, colonial territory, where they are saying that the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of African states shall remain intact, and they cannot really intervene in the domestic affairs. So this is a principle, even though they are talking about the African solutions to the African problems. But I can see that there will be some developments in the coming few weeks, and we will only hope that the African Union initiative, alongside the other international actors and institutions, will bring about some positive change. But still, we have to keep in mind that the African Union's role is complementary to the UN system, and vice versa. So we shall not take unilateral intervention from the US as it has been trying to do over the last few months, or even collective intervention under the UN system, under the UN legal system. But the African Union, as it seems to be, will be taking the lead. And that is my assessment of the African Union's initiative, Dr. Abdullah.
Okay, so in terms of this, like this special diplomat, this former Nigerian president, I mean, how much respect he gets from all the groups? Do you think everyone is more or less fine with this person? Because he's like, I mean, we are talking about, a person who can unify. I mean, who can say things and people on the ground can actually listen as well. So it's not like, oh, we don't like this guy, get rid of him, so he's our enemy. So that kind of, So do you think the acceptability is there on the ground?
Yeah, that's again a good question. And whenever it comes to any form of, especially negotiation, this is not even negotiation, but it is a form of facilitation and mediation, regional mediation. We have to keep two things in mind. Actually, they are the pillars of any negotiation as between the parties, but mediation from the part of the actor who is trying to facilitate. So when we put the role of Ambassador Obasanjo or the mediator, it seems that both parties surprisingly have been positive toward this his engagement, because it is for the first time that the TPLF or the other party to the conflict has officially welcomed his visit, and even they have posted their discussion on Twitter and Facebook. Before, they were saying that the African Union is partial and not independent, and is biased towards the government. But now they are saying this is a good initiative. We would welcome His Excellency's intervention in this matter. So this somehow shows how legitimacy works in conflict resolution, because a mediator has to be legitimate. There should be some kind of legitimacy of the process, credibility of the mediator, and of course there should be also legitimacy and predictability of some form of outcome. So these are the pillars of any mediation. And when I see from this perspective, at least the ambassador has received some form of initial support from both parties. This is very encouraging on the one side. But on the other hand, Dr. Abdullah, I do not agree with the conventional theories on conflict management, which says that a mediator has to be impartial. Actually, there are empirical findings in Latin America and some parts of the world where the so-called paradigm of insider partial negotiator or mediator is much more effective, especially in a communitarian countries or like Ethiopia or Africa, which means that Olusegun is not that much independent. He's not even supposed to be, for me. Insider partial sometimes is preferable than a clueless and the so-called impartial negotiator and a mediator from the outside. So now, if at least he can maintain the independence and institutional independence on the one hand, but functional partiality, because he needs to have the knowledge and what is going on, the history of the country, the difference. So if you combine these two things, an institutional independence, but functional partiality for knowledge and information will give him a leverage to bring these parties together. So that is my theoretical approach to conflict management, not always saying that you have to be partial.
No, that makes total sense. Because like my research area is more like, international peacekeeping. So like in terms of international peacekeeping, one of the golden rule is you have to be neutral on the ground, because if you are not neutral on the ground, then you'll be targeted because you took side. You see, so you are putting your peacekeepers at risk, at harm's way. So like one example is like during the Lebanon civil war, American force, multinational force went there to do peacekeeping. So there are like two events happened. So the first one was successful, but when they went their second time, they took side with one of the groups. And at one incident, America lost 284 Marines in one attack. You see, because then you just exposed yourself, you actually take side, you see. Just like, I'm trying to see it from that point of view, that this like when you are making peace or trying to, bring peace on the table, your neutrality is absolute.
Yeah, but what I was actually, we are on the same boat. What I was trying to bring on board was in support of your idea. So that's what I'm talking about, institutional independence, especially when it comes to the peacekeeping. You have to be absolutely neutral, and you have to be guided by an additional principle of do no harm principle. So the do no harm principle should be a guiding, one of the guiding principle. But when it comes to be a mediator, which is a bit different, you have to combine both. You have to be institutionally independent. You have to be also, in terms of outcome, you have to be independent and credible, because you do not expect any personal issues or conflict of interest. You must avoid conflict of interest in mediation. But when it comes to the role, the personal role to be played by the mediator, I would say having an inside partial, or maybe if it is a team, a group of mediators, then it is good to have a proper balance or combination of someone who is technically technical expert but still neutral, and some other interlocutors with insider information. It is just like, let's take a family conflict, Dr. Abdullah, in our study. Who is the best mediator? The neighbors.
The family,
Either someone from the family member, extended family member, or from the neighbors. What does that supposed to mean? Because that person knows them very well. So sometimes there's no neutrality. It is someone who tells them that, okay, no, I'm not going to buy this thing or propaganda or lies you are talking about. I really know what you are, who you are, and what you are doing, and the expectations. So sometimes such kind of bold mediators are necessary, but it all depends on the prevailing circumstances on the ground and the issues at stake, as you have rightly mentioned. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay, I didn't have the time to read your article, but I just like briefly before coming to like see you today, I was just reading just the comment section. I mean, it's like the comments are, like all kind of stuff. People say things. There are a couple of comments are quite, like interesting. Like basically they're saying that, yeah, I mean, the author is saying that, this multilateral approach, peace and all those things. But the problem is there is one group which are actually terrorists, so we don't have to deal with them. Mm-hmm. So the conversation is saying that, yeah, we want peace, we want dialogues, but we have to exclude one of the group because these are terrorists. So, I mean, that's quite worrying sign, because I think that goes to more like, this ultra, kind of nationalist ethnicity and all those other.
That is actually, yeah, Dr. Abdullah, that is a good observation. I was also somehow reading the comments, and it's not new and surprising for me, because I receive that on everything I do on a daily basis. But for some neutral observer like you, it is very, very striking. It strikes to the heart of the matter. And that actually is a reflection of the government narrative, the prevailing narrative, saying, okay, the TPLF is a terrorist group from the perspective of the government or the Ethiopian parliament, not even from the perspective of international community, because bear in mind that when it comes to crime of terrorism, there is no universal definition of terrorism to this state. That is why we could not, or no way that the world community could not agree on a single definition of terrorism. We don't have international convention on terrorism, but on anything else. Because one of the reasons, as you may read Antonio Cassese on this, because he has an extensive research on these areas. One of the things he said is this general principle: your terrorist is my freedom fighter, and yesterday's terrorist is tomorrow's government. I would add that.
Yeah.
On it.
And which happened historically,
which happened a lot of time, and it always happened. So look, Mandela was a terrorist, right? The international community was considering him as a terrorist, and then he was a freedom fighter, and finally he was one of the most cherished leader in the world, and then everywhere in the Middle East. Or even America was negotiating with Taliban. So even I am against the narrative that no government has ever negotiated with a terrorist. And there is one book, I think with a journalist named Paul, who said, How to Talk to Terrorists. And in that book, he says that governments of all colors and stripes has always been, since the time immemorial, has been negotiating with terrorists. And one of them being the UK government with the Irish Irish army. You remember that?
Yeah.
They were terrorists for all legal and practical and political reasons, but finally there were negotiations. Take the case of Israel and Palestine in the Oslo Accord. They were terrorists, but still negotiating. So I'm just telling you that if you ask just a basic factual issue, saying, for moral and legal purposes, we are not going to negotiate with terrorists. It is non-negotiable. Is simply is false. It doesn't stand to the logic and the facts on the ground. So I'm just bringing these issues that most of the time the narratives are driven by emotions and the politics of zero-sum game, as you have mentioned in the previous discussion, like this political culture of saying either I will get 100% or you lose, and your lose is my gain and my gain is your lose kind of political thinking. I know, because this is very important issue, that's why I'm elaborating. The TPLF could be a terrorist group. As a person, as an individual, I may say TPLF is a terrorist group, but for the supporter of the TPLF, whether those supporters are the Tigrayan people or the international community, which are somehow lending their help in one way or another, TPLF is just simply a freedom fighter who is trying to fend off the federal government's intervention, or what they prefer to call invasion from the federal government. So that said, this very narrative is a sticking point for negotiation, unless you, unless the parties, especially the federal government take a step back and try to reframe the narrative, this is going to be one of the major stumbling block in the process of negotiated settlement. So yeah, you are right. This was a good observation, and we have to grapple with this sticking issue.
So, like, I mean, what's your take, the recent thing happening? Do you think there is a shift there in terms of, you know, that narrative, or is still very much intact, that narrative?
Then we can deduce whether there is a shift of narrative, the change of narrative or not, depending on the official position of the government or the media report, because these are, and the public opinion. These are the three main sources of gauging whether the narrative, what is the narrative and where it is going and whether it is changing. But I would say it is still intact, except for the fact that there is some form of, I would say, not change of position, but readiness from the part of the government, some form of concession, mostly informal, to deal, or at least to talk to the terrorists. Like I said, to talk to the terrorists. So from the side of for the general public and the media outlets, it remains still intact. But when it comes to the government policies, as it was reflected through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and related organizations, there seems to be, at least to me, some change of position, not narrative as such. So, because if you are ready to talk to the same terrorist, it means that there are at least partially some change of narratives.
I mean, can you just guide us through in terms of, you know, the media situation? Like, obviously, you know, we see, like, you know, in UK, BBC, Sky, you know, CNN, all kind of news media, and some local news media as well. So, like, we see, like, you know, people like Rupert Murdoch owns, you know, vast majority of the mainstream media. In terms of Ethiopia's, this, like, you know, domestic media politics, is there a situation where do you think that the media actually controlled by a very small number of people, or it is more like divided in terms of, you know, this regional or ethnic fault line?
When it comes to the role of media in actually inciting violence over the last few years, it is quite obvious that the different ethnic groups have their own media, and they have played a crucial role in fomenting violence, in mobilizing ethnic conflict, which has been constantly recorded and observed. So that said, now when it comes to Ethiopia, and I will come to the role of international media very briefly, in Ethiopia, the political polarization is reflected, exactly transposed into, or at least reflected both in the social life plus the media narrative. So there are two ways: either you support X or Y. There is no middle ground. There is no even politics of ideas. Especially when it comes to war, you have to choose side. And you have to choose side, and usually you choose side not based on ideology, not based on actually rational choice or vested interests that you have in the conflict or in ending the conflict, the other way around, but usually based on your identity. So if you belong to a specific ethnic group, to the left or to the right, then you will accept everything either as true or as a lie, like as a propaganda. So let me give you one example, just today's example. Amnesty International used to release reporters, regular reporters, occasional reporters, and investigations. And they do sometimes an in-depth investigation, at times biased or having some form of inherent methodological problem in investigating issues. Whatever that problem is, just sometimes a specific group, whenever they think that it is in their favor, they will be circulating the report of Amnesty International 24/7. That is what happened. So today, the Amnesty International released a report which shows the TPLF has committed very heinous crimes against humanity, war crimes, where 14 women out of the 16 women who were interviewed by the Amnesty International people were gang raped and all forms of violence. And the same report was released in February, I think, where they implicated the Eritrean soldiers, the Ethiopian Defense Force, and the Amara regional forces or special forces or militia doing the same thing. So back then, the Amnesty International was dubbed as favoring the terrorist group and trying to meddle into the internal affairs of Ethiopia. And today, they are a credible source of information. So I'm just giving you this example of how the same institution, the same investigation, and with different outcome could be perceived differently for different reasons and by different actors. So the media polarization has shown unprecedented nature. It is so polarized to the extent that you cannot even freely comment upon any specific issues in which pertains to Ethiopia or national interests. So, but then the international media, to be honest, they have waged a digital war against Ethiopia. It's okay. I may not support the government, but when it comes to the national interest of the state, I cannot hold back and sit back and relax, because this is high time for me, and it is necessary to defend the collective interest, of course. So the difference being how we define the Ethiopian interest anyways. So international media seem to have a concerted effort of tarnishing the image of Ethiopia in general. I can give you one of the expression from Mutau, a human rights scholar, a Kenyan-born human rights scholar, who said the international human rights discourses are guided by 3 S, which is the savage and the saviors, being the Africans are the savage and the Western are the saviors, and generally the Orientalists. The East are the savage and the others are the saviors, and that is directly reflected in the media. So they think that every government does not feel any sort of responsibility against its own citizen, but it's only the international community and those specific community who cares for the citizen from some quarter of the world. So when it comes to international media, they are mainly biased to one side or the other, without making proper investigation of the objective reality on the ground. And then that, of course, fits into the polarization of the politics itself and what maybe they wish to see happening instead of what is going on the ground. So that is my observation when it comes to the role of media in either inciting violence or mitigating the damage. In both ways, media has been playing and is still playing a very important role in this regard, Dr. Abdullah. So, yes, we are in the midst of war, and that even makes the room for sensibility very slim and difficult to come by.
Because I'm seeing that, you have got this sense of, frustration that you are saying, we are in the midst of war. What does it mean? So, but from my understanding is Ethiopia is still not in war. There are something happening, and then, some bad stuff going on, but there is a standing government, standing army. So there's a state there still intact very much. So when you talk about, midst of war in a country, so we're talking about the Syria civil war, basically, just like everything is falling apart. Just like give us some idea, what's the exact situation? The people who are living in Addis Ababa, are they feeling like they are in war right now? Or do you think people can actually go to office, go to school, come back to their normal life, watch TV, and then go back to school or office tomorrow? So those routines, do you think is still there or gone?
Yes, the people are still going to office, and the kids are attending school, and life is as normal as possible, especially in the capital city. But when so there are two situations that we are in. We have two different scenarios. One is where we are engulfed in a civil war, and all out ethnic war. For me, it is ethnic war, not even simply civil war,
Yeah.
but the war based on identity. So most of the battlegrounds are in the northern part of Ethiopia, where 3 regions out of the 10 Ethiopian regions, 3 regions are directly affected and partly controlled by the TPLF forces, and where the special forces, the government forces, I mean the national army, and some militia are fighting against the TPLF in the northern part of the country. So in that particular area, in those areas, life is not normal because there are so many IDPs and life is uncertain, and you don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, and including those heinous crimes and horrendous acts of violence that I told you just a moment ago. And on the other hand, there are the rest of the country where the fear is still on the horizon, because this is by its very nature a war of an all-out war, where the suspicion is everywhere and everyone is suspecting each one. And then in the capital especially, now we have the state of emergency, okay, which was declared a week ago. And because of this law or new special state of emergency, the government has a mandate, or the command post or the task force can do whatever they want based on what is given to them by the law. And one of which being they can arrest you based on your identity. And the Tigrayans feel that they are not safe even in the capital, and I share that concern to some extent. But on the other hand, those people who are collaborating and enabling the TPLF to advance to the other part, to the rest of the country, including the capital, they should be somehow regulated through a proper due process of law, without affecting their human rights and their dignity, and by following a proper legal procedure. So that is my big concern. And now, in the south of the country, there is the Oromo Liberation Army, which is fighting against the government to topple the government and control the south, generally the Oromia region, one of the biggest regions. So the TPLF has signed an agreement 2 months ago, where they wanted to sandwich the government in the middle, so that the TPLF comes from the north, and the OLA and other militia or insurgent group will advance from the other side, and they will meet somewhere. They are already working together. So this gives you the picture that we are in a civil war, ethnic war, and the fear is high in other parts of the country, not necessarily because there is an actual war there. It's just because of the polarization and the rhetoric, the ethnic profiling here and there, and the uncertainty of life, and the deteriorating standard of living, especially following the threat of sanction by the United States and some withholding of funds from the European Union, and the already crippling economy, because the inflation is skyrocketing now. So when we taken together, all these factors are conspiring and making life a bit harder in the center. But for those in the north, it is an actual war, and it is unimaginable, Dr. Abdullah. That's why I'm saying in my article, to link it to that article, the title say we must stop the civil war to save Ethiopia. That's what it says. To save Ethiopia. It is not to save even a specific group or even political party, to save the country as it is. Because what we see and the force which is coming, the wave and the tides, is so concerning that the very future of the country hangs in balance. So the future is very precarious. That's why I'm saying either we save the country in the interest of all for the common good, or there is a possibility of risking some forms of state failure, and even the risk of disintegration based on the state formation and structure that we have in Ethiopia.
I mean, just like one quick pertinent question here. So the TPLF actually was in power
1991 to 2018.
So that's a long haul. And also, I think you can remember like the TPLF rule in your lifetime, because
I have a lived experience actually.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just trying to, explore a bit more on this particular, your experience. What's your understanding about TPLF rule?
My understanding of the TPLF is this. If I will just say three things about the TPLF, the fact that it is state terrorism, not just simply terrorists, while they were on power, while they were ruling the country with an iron fist, they were terrorizing the people. State terrorism was there on an wide-ranging scale. So that is one thing. They were repressive to the extent that there is no opposition, credible opposition, and they muzzled any free speech. They imprisoned and they engaged in extrajudicial killing. I am part of that movement which brought the TPLF itself down, especially during the last days. In 2017, 2018, I was back in Ethiopia from the University of Dundee. I just left you and joined that civil movement, social movement. So the TPLF is no more wanted. It is not in the hearts and minds of the Ethiopian people, I would tell you, in the rest of the country. And everybody knows, and this generation knows what TPLF can do. And if they come back, I'm not saying that there is no possibility of coming back, but they can only do one thing. They either disintegrate Ethiopia and carve out the greater Tigrayan country, if possible. That's what they can do, or to destabilize Ethiopia and make it ungovernable. That is the only thing they can do. But ruling this generation, which knows very much and is still suffering from the trauma of that repressive regime and that level of brutality and state terrorism. Of course, I'm not saying that the TPLF is also only known for this. They have somehow stabilized Ethiopia through repressive regime and institutions. The economy is not that good, but not as bad as it is today. But generally, politically speaking, the TPLF has lost already the hearts and minds of the vast majority of the Ethiopian people, except for that temporary alliance between the TPLF and some other insurgent groups. Yeah, so that was my personal experience, which is not even long ago. It was 2 or 3 years ago. So I know the TPLF, I know what they are doing, and I know their modus operandi. I know how they rule the country. I know what they plan to do, and they don't even fully say Ethiopia, and it is very difficult for them even to say that they are Ethiopian. They clearly say they are not Ethiopian. So you would see the level of abhorrence they have to the country. So that's my experience. So this is factual. But I don't want to let my personal prejudice to blind my analysis.
So, like, I mean, it's quite interesting because I mean, the TPLF, like, I mean, the whole meaning is they have got something called liberation of some group, isn't it?
Even while they were in power, even while they have been ruling the country for 27 solid good years, they haven't changed their name from the Liberation Front to some kind of nationwide political group. That tells you a lot.
But I mean, while I was doing a bit of reading on TPLF, because obviously during the Cold War, Africa was a kind of, good like battlefield for this East-West divide, Soviet Union, and so this left-right politics. So the TPLF has got this background of socialism, isn't it? So the left politics, they were involved in.
Originally, yeah.
Yeah, originally, yeah. And I think at one point, because I mean, America was not happy about this particular group, I think in the 70s or 80s, they actually put TPLF on the terrorist list as well at some point.
Exactly.
So, but at the same time, so in terms of like TPLF, they got like 27 years. If they come from that kind of ideological background, this left socialism, the power to the people, redistribution of wealth. So in terms of those ideological things, did they do anything about those things? Or no? Just totally departed from those ideological things.
That is actually very a very good observation. So the TPLF during their inception, during those old days, during their formative years, they were saying, okay, they are so leftist and Marxist Leninist group, which is fighting for their people's independence and liberation and self-governance or self-rule. That was it. And then they adopted some form of very, very weird kind of communism, what they call Albanian communism lately, and which by the time when the Albanian communism already stopped believing in their own version of communism, and then they received the backing and the support from the Americans and the West, believing that socialist government, the Derg regime, which was so repressive itself, they just wanted to get rid of that government, and as of course prompted by the Cold War paradigm back then, and so they received that backing. But once they came to power, they introduced the so-called mixed economy, because that is the only way America would accept them.
Yeah.
And then there was nothing mixed throughout their life. And they gave up all the promises of prosperity, the promises of self-rule, which is not there because it was an extremely centralized form of government. The federalism, the ethnic federalism they concocted was not working well. It was just it was working just because of the repressive nature of the regime. And then economically speaking, they looted and embezzled most of the country's resource. And as it was seen when they left the country, and even they were diverting the quite large chunk of foreign aid for party to party lines, and it is a total state capture, I would say. There was state capture, and they were prospering at the expense of the country. And most of the promises, at least those three pillars of prosperity, self-rule, and to some extent bringing about the Ethiopian Renaissance, has not fulfilled. And they, for two reasons. For one reason, they lacked a clear ideological ground, because they call it revolutionary democracy, which has never seen anywhere. There is no revolution. You cannot have revolution and then get it married to democracy. These two things are antithetical. You can't have them together. So that was what they're saying, revolutionary democracy. So that was a confusion from the very beginning. And that's the reason, since the days of their prime minister, or the Marshal Tito of Africa, or of Ethiopia, the party could not hold the different coalitions. So it was because of the personal role of the prime minister, and because of the ideological nature, and because of the repressive regimes that the TPLF had managed to stay on power, but they could not deliver on those grand promises, I would say.
I mean, it's quite interesting, this analogy about, like this Joseph Tito. I mean, what Joseph Tito did, I mean, after Second World War, he kept the country alive, this Yugoslavia, somehow, it's a kind of father figure. People, at the end of the day, Tito is well respected.
He was a benevolent dictator, at least.
Yeah. But so like one credit you can still give to TPLF leadership, that they actually, this 27 years, they actually kept the country, like together. There's no serious, fell out. The things, what happening now, this is like serious fell out now, so the country can actually disintegrate.
Yeah, you are right, partly, and they were able to bring about stability within by imposing. They ensured the so-called negative peace at the expense of positive peace. They did that, but they were not benevolent dictator as well. As I said, the leader was not, because they were trying to infiltrate and consolidate power and resource in the hands of one minority ethnic group. That is what they did. That is what they couldn't manage properly. So the TPLF, representing the Tigray people, this ethnic group, which is a minority, started consolidating everything and ruling everything, from economy to security, from security to the ordinary life. And that was a problem. So that is what infuriated and what even caused the public disobedience, because it became so evident that the TPLF was only interested in consolidating its own power and benefiting a specific section of the society. But that being said, what we are seeing now is a combination of two factors. One is it is a consequence of what the TPLF has been doing over the last 27 years, because they were foreseeing this day, because they made everything ready for the civil war to break out, because they were able to contain it, but once they left it, the structure could not handle it. And then, of course, the other reason is the lack of inexperience or leadership or poor state craftsmanship from the part of the incumbent government that try to bring the country together and rule it. So it is a combination of both. So you cannot exonerate the TPLF from this mess. They designed it, and now we are reaping the fruit of what they have been doing for 27 years. But then partly the current government has also contributed to the mess, and now we have the civil war in the country.
But I mean, from the TPLF's point of view, there is no clear line that they want to depart from Ethiopia. They want to have their own state or own, like, this kind of nationhood. Is there any clear line or clear message there that, what, we don't care about Ethiopia. We just want to have our own homeland. So this civil war, whatever you call it, this is just a liberation fight for us. We just want our own country, because we are just different from those people. We don't trust them, they don't trust us. So we don't have much choice here.
I don't think they themselves are clear with their purpose as such, or at least they have never communicated it clearly. There is a confusion there, and they wanted it both. As long as they are able to rule the country and benefit as much as possible from the bounty, then they would stay. That is what they did for that last 27 years. And now, if they cannot be equal among others, like any other person, and proportional representation, proportional to their contribution, resource, and to their population, then they are not happy with that. That is one point. On the other hand, they want to build their republic, the so-called Greater Tigray Republic, but that is not tenable now. That is the source of confusion. It is not tenable economically, legally, and politically. Why legally? Because there is a land dispute, a contested territory in the western part of Tigray, which is recaptured by the Amhara region or Amhara administration, which means that without that corridor, there will be a pocket country. There won't be external frontier. And in terms of security, they will be encircled by sworn enemies from Eritrea, from the north, then Amhara from the south and southeast, the Afar region, which they are fighting with. So literally, they are encircled by enemies. And economically speaking, the region is devoid of any significant natural resource. No significant natural resource. There is no even big rivers. There is no arable land as such, agricultural land. So it is not even habitable as such by nature. So it is just mountainous. So if you see economically, if you see legally, because they have to go through the legal procedure, and then the federal government may not approve that. And there is in any divorce, there is a post-divorce proceeding in legal language. Who is going to raise the kid and alimony and all those things. That is not going to be settled. So I'm just giving you this dimension that it is not tenable. So they wanted to have it, but it's very difficult. So now they resorted to remove the prime minister and the government, the incumbent government, so that they will come back to power and make necessary preparation for carving out the country. And then they will go through the illegal mechanism. If they come through the legal mechanism, these are the hurdles out there, very formidable challenges. So that's the confusion. So, and one day you hear them that they are fighting the prime minister of Ethiopia and bring those responsible for crimes to justice. And then the other day they talk about we don't belong to Ethiopia and we need our own state. And then some other day they say they are defending the interests of the Tigray people while they are invading some other region because they don't have any business in other regions. So these are the confusions which is not relaying a clear message to the international community and domestic actors equally. That's my observation.
But I mean, at the same time, it looks like this particular group, ethnic group, they're quite powerful. Obviously, they have been in power. So basically, they more or less hoarded serious amount of resources for their own interest. But also, it looks like since that part of Ethiopia is not like resourceful, so it's like more kind of their own interest. They try to maximize their position so that they can sustain longer. But at the same time, it looks like this moving fast towards capital and then take over the country. I'm just trying to bring like other actors here on the ground. I mean, how much China is involved in any of those things?
The Chinese involvement in this political process, or maybe as it is applicable to the ongoing conflict, is not so clear. It's not quite clear. Of course, China has been the Ethiopian ally since 2005, especially. There had been a renewed engagement between Ethiopia and China, or a love affair between the two countries, mainly prompted by the 2005 election scandal, where the Western countries wanted to disengage with Ethiopia. So they turned to China, and then China brought in infrastructure, money, debt, and all those things. And then, of course, Ethiopia was, just last year, Ethiopia was the second largest debtor towards China, just only next to Zambia.
Oh, wow.
And so the debt diplomacy, or what they call debt trap, is there. So China is interested in economic diplomacy, not political engagement as such. And that is reflected in UN deliberation of the UN Security Council, where China and Russia has been constantly blocking any resolution on Ethiopia, which has been proposed by other permanent members. So of course, it is not necessarily that they are defending the interests of Ethiopia or even supporting the Ethiopian government for that matter. But as you know, that the UN Security Council has been dysfunctional for quite some time, that whatever is proposed by one group has to be aborted by the other group. But still, it is in the best interest of China to work towards the stability of Ethiopia, because they have huge economic interests there, huge diaspora community, big projects being constructed in Ethiopia. So it is in the best interest of China, and they have been somehow showing some kind of now reluctance to show that stubborn position and saying the Ethiopian people are capable of resolving their problem, and they need to engage in all-inclusive national dialogue and resolve their problem and the problem of their diversity, and manage and the conflicts in the country in that clever way, or maybe some kind of behind the scene pressure. But clearly there is no official position from the part of China either denouncing or supporting one group or the other. So that is the development on the ground.
Like, I mean, in terms of their involvement in the north, how much is there?
Not much. Based on objective indicators, we could not see anything tangible, because China is not meddling, not even as it used to be. Not, for example, supplying any weapons. No. I mean, China normally will not do that. No, not normally. They do not do that. But when it comes to when the push comes to the shove, it used to do like it did in Sudan and Zimbabwe. China used to supply some weapons when the government is in short of supply. But this time around, even China is not supplying. The government has to rely on the Turkish government to supply some form of weapons and some form of agreement. So this tells you something, that China wanted to distance itself from any kind of political engagement other than trade. Even then, supply of weapon itself is part of trade, but China is somehow showing kind of cautious approach even in this regard. So there is nothing much to say. No. But at the same time, like, it looks like China can actually play a positive role, because for China, their interest lies on with the stability of the country. Do you think like China actually can actually do something here? Yes, China can and should do something to resolve this conflict. It is not in the best interest of, sustainably speaking, the best interest of nobody, actually, whether it is China or United States or the UK or even the immediate neighbors. Yeah. Resolving this conflict is in the best interest of all of the international community, near and far. When it comes to China, China can at least play two roles. One is to put pressure bilateral, not within the multilateral system, as we discussed in the UN security system structure, but China can push somehow both parties to come to the negotiation table through the carrot and the stick diplomacy. So China can do that, and then the second avenue available for China is to support the regional institution, including the AU, both technically and financially, including recognizing any initiative underway in Africa and by IGAD or the African Union, as we discussed. So China can do these two things, but then maybe the third one is in multilateral institutions. For example, instead of blocking fundings to Ethiopia, China can play the bridge building role, where China can bring Ethiopia and other major powers together, saying that, okay, let's talk and do proper diplomacy and bilateral and multilateral effort to resolve this conflict instead of severing diplomatic relationship or the deteriorating relationship between the United States and Ethiopia, or maybe some other actors. So this is what China can do and should do.
But the flip side of that argument is USA will not like that situation. Then that will make China more involved in African politics, and USA doesn't want that.
But so China has already been involved in Africa. That's a paradox.
So but at the same time, USA doesn't like that. So anything which helps USA's position, USA might like, the disruption might be a good idea, because that can put off China. So it's in terms of like a bit of destabilization, actually work for America's, interest, national interest.
I think that emanates from the America's foreign policy. America's foreign policy has always been a kind of interventionist policy state, and also defining the national interest, the American national interest, in terms of somebody else's loss. So if China is there, America is not going to be there, kind of thing. So the containment policy is back on the table. There's a Cold War paradigm. Containment policy was a potent tool which had been used by the United States to some extent to contain the Soviet Union. And not China very much, because China was forgotten by the American foreign policy for 3 decades, as you know. So I think the previous government, the TPLF, was somehow wise enough to do business with both. With America, they were providing security in fighting terrorists in the Horn of Africa. And then with China doing economic relationship. And then following the change of government in 2018, there was a fundamental shift of policy, somehow promising the United States more liberalization of economy, showing some change of policy, where the government distances itself, even ideologically distancing itself from that Chinese revolutionary democracy or whatever towards America. And once the United States realized that the current government is not doing what it is supposed to do, and the relationship within China has not totally severed, then they started, as you said, playing the game, and the realist game of the zero-sum game, where they have to contain China to some extent, but that should not come at the expense of the territorial integrity of Ethiopia, because then the United States is not going to gain anything, because then Ethiopia is no more a partner in guaranteeing any security. And then destabilization for now would be disruptive of the order, disruptive for China, but in the long term, it's not going to be against the interests of China as well.
Yeah,
that is where they got it wrong.
It looks like from the geopolitical kind of perspective, China will not gain much from here, and also USA will not gain much here as well, because the whole thing will be totally disrupted.
Especially putting it within the context of Horn of Africa, because we don't have any stable country. The only remaining stable country is, and big country, is Ethiopia, somehow, and Kenya. Then all other 6 or 7 countries have got their own problem, domestic problem of stability and even statehood. So you are right. If you just add Ethiopia into the basket of failed state, let alone the United States and China. All the international actors, including the European Union, are not going to benefit both in the short term and in the long run from the failure of Ethiopia.
That's a kind of good news for Ethiopia, because I mean, it looks like for US's interest and for China's interest, both parties have got interest to actually, make Ethiopia a viable country rather than, totally failed country. It's for their own interest. So that's good news. That means, they will not involve in bad politics on the ground. So they will not,
At least China China is not going to intervene anyway. The United States is showing, it seems that the United States is not learning much from the situation of Afghanistan. China, I mean, the United States with its own policy has tried to engage in the project of state building, which has proven to be time and again a failure, a total disaster, one state after another. So they just got out of Afghanistan, and they are still fresh in the tip of their mind, and trying to meddle into Ethiopia. It means that the United States cannot even afford to do that, because a failure after failure and won't be good even for the normative power of the United States. Normatively speaking, the soft power will be damaged, and the projection of their power will be tarnished as well. So they need to think from that perspective, because those people are an expert, and as much as we think about this issue, they should also consider whether that's going to serve their interest or not.
I still remember, I think there's an American envoy went to Ethiopia, I think 2-3 weeks ago.
2-3 weeks ago, and now he's planning to come back this week again. He's Jeffrey Feltman.
So what's the response from the ground?
Not much, because most of the issues are not conveyed to the general public, and what they have discussed and the outcome, we just hear from some news, foreign media, and usually the press release of the United States. From the part of the Ethiopian government, you do not hear much. So many information has been suppressed. But based on what I have seen and read from some news agencies, is that this envoy has not been warmly welcomed in Ethiopia. Now he has been there twice, and the prime minister refused to talk to him even. Only the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and some regional president and I think the Ethiopian state president who had a dialogue with him, even a discussion with him. So this shows that he is not welcomed, and that is of course linked to the United States policy towards Ethiopia. That's my observation.
I'm just trying to try to find some kind of solution in that jigsaw, who is the right person to actually.
There is one possibility, one issue that I missed. If now they are trying to come through the African Union and teaming up with the African Union envoy, so and with the European Union as well. So that way, I think it will make a difference somehow. If they defer the matter to the African Union and local ownership of the initiative, and providing some form of diplomatic, technical, and economic assistance from the outside, without directly dictating the process and the outcome. I think that is a prospect or a good news.
I mean, if I play this devil's advocate here, so if I see myself as part of the North, so obviously I'll be worried about my future, so what kind of peace we are talking about here. So what will actually happen to me? Will I be safe? Will the state we are talking about will take care of me? Or I will be seriously marginalized, because now the state will come to me and punish me severely because I was a naughty boy. I mean, because those things need to be, discussed as well, because they need serious, goodwill that, this is the scenario, no harm will be done, because when you talk about this like reconciliation and then, this like truth commission, justice, and all those things, you need serious stuff there on the ground, because the TPLF leadership will be also worried that, what will happen to them. So lots of things to unpack there.
There are a lot of people, but Dr. Abdullah, to begin with your first question, which pertains to the issue of security. The security, as you know, is a collective endeavor, where the one who feels threatened has to contribute toward his or her own security. So if you are making everything impossible, or making the ground unfavorable or not conducive for security, sustainable security and peace and stability, then it is very, very, very difficult to expect external security. While on the other hand, those people from the north, and specifically the TPLF, they have a concern, of course, a real concern. There is a perception, and the perception itself plays a major role. And one of the reasons why reconciliation is going to be very difficult, or maybe even they may not even participate in the reconciliation process, is the lack of trust. Because if one party wins, then there is a punishment. There won't be accountability from both sides. One party has to, one actor has to punish the other party. That is a culture, that is a precedent, that is a practice in the past. And these people or these leaders have worked together, by the way. They came from the TPLF and toppled them down. They have worked for 27 years together. So they know each other very, very much. And when you know each other very well, two things happen, two extreme scenario. Either you completely fall in love with each other, or you are a sworn enemy. So either there is a trust or lack of trust. There is nothing in between. That is why we need a broker and an independent, as we said, and somehow impartial mediator and an interlocutor. So you are right. As long as the TPLF is not in the process of national dialogue and reconciliation, as long as accountability is attributed to all those who are responsible for their crimes proportionally, according to their contribution, and based on the principle of legality and individual criminal responsibility for all those international crimes, then it is very, very difficult, or even hard to comprehend the possibility of having this sort of even power sharing, mutual understanding, and then peaceful settlement of the conflict. It will be settled one way or another, but this is one of the challenge, or the red roadblock. So this perception plus the real concern of security within the Ethiopian state is the issue which needs to be seriously considered if any form of negotiation effort or mediation effort is to bear fruit. Yeah.
Like, I mean, one good example is like just after the Cold War. So this person called, I mean, I think you remember him, Savimbi, Jonas Savimbi. So like, the UN, no one can make peace with him. So he said, yeah, I'll make peace. He comes back, and then he just like ran away, and then started fight. So as long as he was there, you just cannot make peace. And then somehow the coalition force and the USA, CIA, and everyone, more or less, they managed to kill him. And then the problem solved in like 24 hours. This like 10, 12 years war, suddenly just gone. just one guy. Is there a one guy anywhere that if he's gone, then, is is there a Savimbi character anywhere?
Yeah, that is a good analogy that you brought into the discussion. There are some, not one guy, but there are some guys or bad apples from both sides, from both sides of the Atlantic. One is the terrorism. I mean, the terrorist group itself, the labeling of the group as a terrorist, which means that if we take this argument to its natural conclusion, that means the government wants us to eliminate this terrorist group, then everything will be fine. At least you can negotiate with the people or some others who will represent that people. But then the issue is you cannot fight or win a war of ideology through bullet, because the TPLF has already ingrained their ideology and idea into the societal, socio-cultural identity. So even if you get rid of some of the leaders, of course, the federal government has managed to kill some of them last year during the first stage or phase of the operation. But still, you kill 10, and then you will find 10,000 sprouting out like mushrooms, the mushrooms the other day. So there are some guys, not necessarily killing them, but if it is possible to bring them to justice, and then holding a national dialogue and a truth-finding mission, who did what and when and against whom, then it is possible, as you said, but not one guy, but there's quite few bad guys out there who are actually blocking any peace, any prospect of peace in Ethiopia from both sides.
So, I mean, can I say like things like these people in the north, Tigrayan people, they are also hostages of the situation by their leadership?
Yes, they have been taken hostage actually for over the last 45 years now. The Ethiopian government or central government has never been able to rule that region since 1970s, to be honest. Which means this TPLF group has been mobilizing the people during their fight against the old regime in the 1970s. And once they controlled that region in the late 1970s, all the way to now, 2021, more than 40 years, it is quite a long time. So they know the psychology, and they has taken the people hostage, which means TPLF means the Tigray people, and Tigray people means TPLF as their narrative goes. I'm not saying that, but they are telling the people that if you are gone, you will suddenly disappear from this planet. And that is what they came up with some never existing legal or technical term, which is called genocidal war. There is no such a thing called genocidal war. Either it is a civil war or ethnic war, but it is a war. Genocide is a crime, not a war. So that is why they are telling people that this war is genocidal war, which is waged against your existence, this existential threat. So you are right, they have taken the people hostage, and even to expect someone or some group from that society challenging the dominant narratives and somehow coming up with an alternative idea has been difficult, and still there is no meaningful initiative or success from that part of the country.
I mean, I don't think I can finish the talk even today, because I mean, it's so much to dig here,
Quite a lot of issues and nuances.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like there's a serious trust issue here. Trust issue, and then the security stuff, and then, leadership. It's a, combination of, bunch of bad politics, seriously bad politics, and it's just not good. It's just not good, and it will not go anywhere. It
It's
will
not
create
good
more
for the
violence,
country, not
more
for any
destruction.
part.
So
More destruction, more damage, unless it is arrested. The situation has to be arrested sooner rather than later.
The last point today is, like sometimes you go so far, there is no, way you can return. So do you think they crossed that point, that, it's like no return? There's no chance. It's gone too far.
I think we have already, as a country, crossed that line already, with one of our leg already very much crossing that line, and with one leg of the left leg, let's say, somehow touching the line, and that only line or hope being the social fabric, which is not totally dismantled yet. They have dismantled it throughout this war by making the war a people's war, which was unnecessary. Instead of fighting through professional army, they made it a public war and ethnic war. So that destroyed the social fabric, but still it is there because of the makeup of the Ethiopian society. Like, we are intermingled, intermarried, and there is no even that clear distinction of identity as such. So that is one hope I have. So there is no animosity between people as such. It is a power struggle between two old friends, actually. So if the international community can push forward and bring these leaders, actually, there are quite just a dozen of them from both sides, and they negotiate, the people, as they have shown 3 years ago, will accept the outcome without much difficulty. So this is only prospect. So we have crossed it, but still we have a little hope remaining on that regard.
Thank you, Moges. So I mean, I'll stop here today. I really want to stop with this positive note, because I really want to hear some positive things there.
So thank you very much, Professor. Now it is late night there.
And thank you. You'll take care. Okay. Bye-bye.